Hello, everybody. Welcome to rentals. This is one of the very, very best ways that I have ever seen, heard, or done to create cash flow, money in the meantime to live, pay bills, do all that fun stuff, but also create lasting wealth. So, Steve, just a quick little thing. I'm hearing a lot of noise on the microphone end. In case you wanted to mute until we ask questions. All right, that sounds better. So hopefully you guys are here to learn how to make lots of money in real estate, because rentals is an amazing way to do that. Yes, it is a marathon, not a sprint. You don't just create all of your residual cash flow at once, and equity takes time. If you're in a lucky market or in a hot market for a little while, you're going to get that acceleration of the equity, which is fun and fantastic. But you've got to think about this as a long-term marathon that creates actual wealth, real wealth, the lasting kind that you can pass on to your kids, your grandkids, generation after generation can enjoy the fruits of your labors now during your lifetime. So that's amazing. But have your expectations realistically set that this is not going to be a quick fix to all of your problems. If you have some debt, some financial problems, this is a great way to piece away at it, but get that expectation in your mind that this is something you're going to do year after year and continue to add to your portfolio until you have as many rental properties as you want for retirement and to pass on to your legacy. To go over something we've covered many, many times about the critical nature of needing to assemble a team. You don't ever do real estate alone. By the nature of being a real estate investor, you're going to have that clear expectation that you're going to need title companies, attorneys, contractors. There are always sellers and buyers you need to work with. If you're going to own rentals, you're going to have tenants. This is all part of your business. So you're creating a long-term business, which means you need to develop relationships. So we've put a really pretty long list. It's not exhaustive. We don't have, for example, an exchange company on here or an IRA company. But if you look at the basic core nature of what we listed here, these are the people that you're going to use over and over for all types of real estate transactions, whether that's rentals, fixing and flipping, wholesaling, whatever you do. This is a great list to start with. What we are going to cover in our 6-week series, and we'll have another one coming up here fairly soon if you want to get registered. We'll talk about that at the end. But tonight we're going to cover what we actually cover in the series. So what are the benefits and risks? There are obvious risks associated with being a property owner. How do you find good deals? Where do you get the funds to purchase rentals? Can you use seller financing to pick up rentals? Do you always have to get a loan? If you do need to get a loan, what kinds of things do you need to prepare for so that you're ready to qualify for that loan? How do you analyze the rental properties to make sure that they cash flow well and that the numbers work well and you're not negative every month? And then how are single family, multifamily, and commercial rentals different from each other? What are the advantages of hiring a property manager versus managing yourself? Trust me, it's a very, very large difference. It's a whole different kind of business. In one, you're an investor and a property owner, and in the other, you're a landlord, and it takes a lot of your time and energy. So what are the pros and cons of that? And if you're going to manage yourself, how do you manage the repairs? How do you manage contractors to get the repairs done? What about the ongoing maintenance issues that can come along with property ownership? Or if you hire somebody, if you hire a property manager, what about managing the manager, making sure that they're doing their job well? I've got a few stories about that too. So how do you handle evictions, inspections, leases, down payments? What do you have to do legally in your area to secure their deposits? There are different requirements that you're going to need to talk to a local real estate attorney about, but we can give you the gist of so much. We can give you all the basics and then a whole lot more, and then you can take that information and talk to your attorney about it. So this thing right here, number 2 on the list, how to handle legal issues, doing it yourself versus using an attorney. Prepaid Legal being one of those attorney companies that's pretty good overall. They have some specific pros and cons to what they do. And then adding value to your property. When you buy it, it doesn't just sit there. You've got to take care of it. You can lower expenses. You can increase rents over time. When is the right time to do that? How much do you increase those rents without losing all of your tenants? How about reducing your overall expenses with your property taxes? How about reducing your taxes themselves? When is it appropriate and when is it cost effective to do upgrades and repairs? What kinds of upgrades actually bring a better rent, so what you're investing into the property is actually an investment and not just an expense? And then tax management with the 1031 exchange, anything with investing IRA funds, the difference between a regular traditional IRA and a Roth IRA, and then seller financing, how and when can you use that to maximize your profits on your rentals? That's a lot of information. We cram it into 6 weeks plus a whole lot more. But before we get started into week by week what we cover, Steve, do you have anything that you want to tell everybody at this point?
No, just that, you know, we're talking about a lot of general concepts here, and we get into a lot of the specifics. We go through the 6-week course. So understandably, you'll probably have a lot of questions by the time we're done tonight. Happy to take your questions, but understand that this is an overview, and details are on the way.
Excellent. Thank you. So in week 1, we covered the benefits and risks. How do you find them? How do you fund them? And analyzing them is very important. If your numbers are on, you're looking good. What if your numbers are off? I have just a really quick story about that. I'm in a storytelling mood tonight, apparently. But I'm going to be very careful since this is just an overview. But the first time that I bought a rental property out of state, I found out that there are actually different laws, different tax percentages that are charged. And guess what? In some states, when you're an out-of-state owner, you pay the maximum tax assessed amount on your property taxes. So one year, the year after I bought the rental, and it had the homestead exemptions on it initially when I bought it, those exemptions fell off and my taxes tripled. And guess what that did to my cash flow? Luckily, it was a good enough deal. I still had cash flow, but it really, really dropped in there and cut into it. So lesson learned. Those are the kinds of things we share with you to watch out for when you're doing your due diligence. So today's takeaway on analyzing the deal, the day that we do that, your takeaway should be, how do you do your market research? Where do you even look to assess market rents in the area where you're buying your rentals? If you're in your local city, it's a little bit easier in a lot of ways, but you can invest safely in rentals anywhere in the world as well, as long as you know a lot of information about that market, those laws in that area, and you have a good team in that area. Now, cap rate is something that I wanted to put in right when we're talking about analyzing the deal, because it is one of the most common ways that investors figure out if this property is going to give them a decent return, the kind of return that they're looking for. So how you determine cap rate is, number one, you get the gross income. So all of the rents that are collected, if it's a larger rental, maybe there are coin-operated washers and dryers, there can be candy machines, there can be all sorts of different additional charges like renting out the parking spaces, renting out the sheds on the property for storage or small garages. So all of the income gathered together is your gross operating income. Then you're going to subtract the expenses, and then you'll be left over with the net operating income. So in this example, just so you have some real numbers to play with, if you're like me, you like to actually get the calculator out and punch in the numbers and see what that does. So it's not just a theory in the head, but it's an actual real potential scenario. So $18,000 of gross income during the year, and obviously this would be kind of a smaller property, just a small single family house, or maybe a duplex in the Midwest where it doesn't bring in a lot of gross income for the year, but this is a very realistic example of what you're going to get as a beginning investor. For most of you, you're going to start out with some smaller properties. So take that $18,000, subtract off $12,000 for expenses. That's going to leave you with $6,000 for the year for your net operating income. Now, why is that NOI so important? That net operating income is what you're actually going to use to determine if this property is a good price. And I'm going to tell you that is so critical, because if you have a house that costs $200,000 but it only rents out for $600 a month versus one in a different city that might rent out for $1,500 a month for that exact same investment of $200,000, your cap rate is going to be very different. So when you're sticking with rentals, it's not about the after repair value like it is on a buy, fix, and flip. Your NOI, net operating income, is going to be divided by your purchase price, or whatever you're going to offer as a purchase price, not necessarily the list price, but what you actually buy it for. That's your purchase price amount you divide it by. And then that will give you a cap rate. So that looks like this. In example 1, if you took that $6,000 NOI and divided it by $40,000 for a little teeny house somewhere in Ohio, then you're looking at a 15% cap rate. Okay, you're going to get a number, you just multiply it by 100 to get the actual percentage for your cap rate. In another example, you could have a lot higher NOI, but if you're dividing it by a much more expensive purchase price, you see how the cap rate is much lower. So it goes 0.054 times 100 equals 5.4% cap rate. Now that was actually a property that I sold. Well, we bought it, we held it and cash flowed it and sold it by a university. So a 5.4% cap rate on something that's just going to be pure cash flow, it's just a cash flow property, and you're not really expecting it to appreciate a lot over the years, maybe 3% per year average, versus something in a very hot market, a very strong rental market, right by a university that's going to appreciate a lot. Well, now you're juggling between what the cash flow is, so that 5.4% cap rate, plus all of the equity. Together they make a good deal. Where sometimes you just want a really good cash flow because that's your goal for the next 5 years. All I want to do is buy these little properties that cash flow. Well, then you're going to be looking for properties with cap rates at 10% or higher, and you can actually get those on properties in certain cities. In other cities, you're going to be hard pressed to even get above 8%. So in week 2, we cover multifamily and commercial. What are the differences between those different types of rentals? How do you understand the numbers so that you can determine accurately the income, the expenses, the NOI, and the cap rate? How do you find those good deals, and how do you fund them? In that week, we want to help you find actual commercial properties. We want you to get your fingers on the keyboard of your computer or whatever you're using these days, your tablet, your iPad. How do you actually find good deals that are out there for commercial if you're interested in that? So just as an example, there's LoopNet. LoopNet is a site that is very hot out there. It's very well used, and that's a little taste of where you can find commercial properties. Steve, do you have any comments so far?
That as you start to look at cap rates and the commercial properties, especially with commercial, this is really the best gauge of determining whether or not property is a good investment. Oh, there's other formulas out there. There's the 1% formula, etc. But most of those don't take into consideration all of the factors.
Yeah.
So the most complete formula is going to be your cap rate. So you want to be looking at properties that will give you that information.
Yeah.
And this slide here is actually a screenshot of one of the searchable websites. This is from LoopNet, actually. And you can see I've got some
Sorry, I bumped
criteria selected. We've got multifamily there, and I gave it a little bit some parameters. You can actually have it searched by cap rate, sorted out by cap rate. So just a nice tool to be able to look at things, and we wanted to give that to you today.
Excellent. Thank you. So I'm glad that you brought up that 1% rule. That's literally how I was first told to figure out if something cash flowed well or not, and I found it to be very unreliable. As far as determining values and if it's a good rate on rentals, I found it to be as reliable as Zillow is for after repair values for fix and flips, which is about this reliable. Because 1%, a 1% doesn't tell you what all those other expenses are. You might have triple, quadruple expenses on a particular house compared to a different one, and so that in some markets means you need 2% in rents compared to the purchase price to even make it cash flow well. And in other cities, I've seen 0.5% work really well. So to have that wide of a gap between 0.5% up to 2% and always trying to make sure the 1% works, woo-wee, I don't recommend that at all. So week 3, property management and landlording. We go over the differences between doing things yourself and hiring somebody to do it. How do you handle evictions? Do you have to do it yourself? Do you have to file the paperwork? Do you pay your property manager to do it? Those are things that can cut into your time and keep you from going out and finding other good deals if you're going to landlord yourself. Plus, if you don't have certain boundaries or certain personality types to be able to handle tenants well, that can be an extremely stressful part of being a property owner. So we also cover repairs. Where do you find people? Where do you find screening for your tenants? Do you hire a company to screen your tenants, or do you do it yourself? There are online sources that you can use pretty inexpensively. And then week 4, we talk about those inspections, leases, and doing other things yourself legally with the forms. So your move-in inspections, do you go and walk the property with your tenant? Do you like to get that friendly with them, or do you want to hire somebody else to do that? And then your periodic inspections, maybe once every 6 months or so, you're going to go in there. So a lot of owners will have at least a yearly inspection, but sometimes a bi-yearly inspection to go in. Just make sure they're keeping the place up, make sure they haven't moved a bunch of other people in that aren't on the leases. Just general checking to make sure that the place is still in good repair. And one nice way to be able to get in there very easily is to plan that every 6 months you're going to check the furnace filter, a water softener if you have it, check the batteries and the smoke detectors, replace the batteries at least once a year because that's something tenants don't tend to do a lot. So you can put everything on tenants, but there's also some advantage in you staying a little bit up to date on those upkeep items, and it gives you a really, really good reason to go walk that property. And then screening tenants, applications, legal issues, all of that wrapped into, do you do it yourself? Do you hire it out? What are the pros and cons of those things? Steve, do you have any comments on that?
No, that was pretty complete. Just understand again that we've got a lot of detail on each of those topics, and we want to be able to give those to you. But this here is just a list of the different kinds of forms that you might need, and we've got some resources in here where you can also locate some of those. But it would be a good idea just to kind of put those all together, just so you can look at what you're going to be needing, and then getting real familiar with those forms. And if you'll do that, you're going to be ahead of the game when it comes time to start to put this together.
Very good. Again, this is not a completely exhaustive list, but it's a very good chunk of forms to get comfortable with and own if you're going to be a landlord. If you're going to hire out all your property management, then your property management company should have definitely should have all of the forms that are needed in your area to be legal and compliant with when and how many days and notices for evictions, late payment notices, all of that. They need to be familiar with the laws because they are different in different areas, and that's where being a landlord could be tricky. For example, in California, they have a lot more rules in California, and the guidelines and the deadlines and everything that they have to follow are very different, much more particular than in states, say, like Utah. Montana is pretty lenient. A lot of the Midwest states. So just make sure that whoever you hire is familiar with what they're supposed to be doing. If they've been in business quite a while, and I'm sure that they have had a lot of experience with these forms and when and how they have to file them. And that's kind of a big deal. So we will talk about that more in this series, obviously, like Steve said. We have scads of information. Every week has an hour-long webinar to go with it. So each of these topics spoken about in great detail, start to finish. You're going to know who you need on your team for sure. How do you find the properties? All of this about owning the property over time, like in week 5, adding the value. That's an important thing to owning properties. Remember to look for the upside potential. There might be a property that you want to take from apartments into a condo conversion. There are many things you can do with properties. The zoning might change on some of the right on the blocks where you own the properties or in surrounding areas, and you can work with the Planning and Zoning Committee to potentially change your property into something that automatically brings a lot more revenue in for you. So any way that you can increase the income on your properties, keep your expenses really low, cut out expenses that you don't need, sometimes just by shopping around, getting a different, less expensive vendor. And a lot of times it's just watching the expenses and seeing what there is that you haven't paid attention to for a while. Maybe shopping around insurance and getting that brought down lower. You still can have the same coverage, but you'll actually get a lower rate for the same amount of insurance coverage sometimes just by shopping it around. So little tips like that, we'll share that with you. Also, how do you manage your taxes? How do you sometimes get your taxes lowered just by going in and going through the process of working with the tax assessor's office? And then what about those upgrades? When and where are they important? Which ones give you a better return on your dollar, and which ones are probably just an added expense that you really don't need to do as long as it's a rental? And then possibly when you're getting ready to sell it, let's say you have a rental house and you're getting ready to sell it on the retail market, that's a good time to upgrade the countertops or the appliances or something that will actually bring you a good return on value, where if you just keep it as a rental for a while, it's better to keep your expenses down. So today's takeaway on that week's webinar, how do you find your tenants? How do you screen them appropriately? What kind of management do you choose to do? And then on week 6, getting into taxes. Oh goodness, we all love taxes, right? They have to get paid, but you shouldn't have to pay more than your fair share. So how do you make sure that you take advantage of the tax laws that are out there? There's no sense in having tax laws that give you some tax breaks if you're not taking advantage of them. So 1031 exchanges, we cover that. Definitely put a 1031 exchange company on your team of resources if you're going to own rentals, or if you're even going to buy, fix, and flip and then turn it over and put it into another property. That's another great way to maximize how much of that cash you get to keep and not have to pay out a huge chunk in taxes. And then using your IRA. How is it smart? When is it smart? How do you use other people's IRAs? Now that's a good strategy right there, to get into some investment properties with other people's money that's just sitting there making a very small return, and you can put that to work for them and partner with them. There are a lot of creative ways to use other people's money, and one of those ways is through seller financing. So we talk about that too. How do you either buy using seller financing or sell using seller financing techniques, or both? Couldn't your pocketbook benefit from maximizing somebody else's credit, somebody else's equity, somebody else's prior purchase that now you can come in and take over and be in charge of and make money because you're managing the property? Sometimes they're retired landlords and they really, really don't want to hold that property anymore, but they're okay being your bank. So we get into a lot of fun stuff with seller financing. Steve and I both like to think outside the box a lot. That's actually how I bought my first 2 houses, was through creative financing with seller financing. So I'm a big fan, really big fan. Steve, what do you have so far?
That's pretty much it. Just to understand that there's a lot of ways that you can be able to save on taxes. And there are some advantages that you can take with seller financing that affects your taxes as well. So if you're aware of those kind of issues, then that's going to be a bonus to you when it comes time to working with this stuff. So wanted to make you aware that there are some tax advantages also to seller financing.
Yep, absolutely. Thank
As a
you.
buyer and as a seller.
Yes. So that's one way that we actually teach you guys how to get out there and negotiate to have sellers provide you seller financing, because there can be huge tax benefits for them. Not to take a paid off house. They could have a house that's worth $300,000-$400,000 that's paid off, and if they sell that and get that big chunk of cash in 1 year, that can significantly change their tax layout for the year. And so sometimes it's better for them to just provide you a note where you pay them and they're only paying taxes on the money that comes in, again depending on their situation and all sorts of other factors that their CPA needs to help them with. But overall, the message is they could save a lot of money in taxes if they get paid out a little bit every year instead of a big lump sum. Have you ever had some fun exposure with deals like that, Steve?
No.
Ah, well, I have, and I like them. My parents actually sold my childhood house that way because, again, people in their 60s, 70s, a lot of times they don't need those big chunks of cash. And if they can sell the house for either a little higher price instead of just dropping the price down and selling it in a pretty dud market, they can create a note that's a little bit more expensive, take the cash flow, because that's what they really need, is the cash flow to live on that. What are they going to do with all the money at once? You can only spend so much at a time. And so they just needed it to cover their living expenses and to feel like they were getting a good price out of it. That was really important to my dad, is that he didn't give a discount price and sell it really quickly. He was much more motivated about getting paid out over time. So he's just one example of a deal that I helped put together that helped a young family that didn't have good credit get into the home, and a seller get a good price for the house and save a lot of tax liability the first year it was sold. So it was a win-win for them for sure. Self-directed IRA resources. Here is a little taste of a list of places that you can get in touch with that will allow you to invest with either your IRA or someone else's. You can get that other person in touch. They can get their own custodian. Ooh. I don't know why it said I have a slow connection, but it did. Steve, are you noticing anything funny on your end with the connection?
No.
Okay. All right, so self-directed IRAs. Here is a good list of where to start. Some of these companies I've actually worked with my partners or private investors. Not that I did the paperwork for them or had anything to do with the IRA itself, but I got them in touch with some of these companies, and then the custodians at these companies are able to help them transfer the funds and do whatever they need to get their money liquid and set up so that they can use it to invest into real estate. If the money's just sitting there and they can get a much higher return with you, this is where private investors and partners are often able to make bank, so to speak, on their money that's already theirs, but they can make a lot bigger return and a lot more money just using their IRA in specific kinds of deals instead of letting it just sit there getting sometimes a 1%, 2%, 3% return. Some of the additional products and services that we offer. We do group webinars. The group series on any of these real estate topics are available currently. They run for the 6 weeks at 1 hour apiece. And then we also have the daily accountability calls that come with those series, Monday through Friday. And we have one-on-one appointments. You can either buy those a la carte if you just have a few questions or you need a little bit of direction. You can buy them in packages. So that goes for not only real estate investing, but also some of the other things we're going to talk about here in just a minute. We have those daily group accountability calls, which can actually be purchased separately a la carte as well, but at a month at a time. And then group coaching for businesses, and we have contracts and scripts and forms available for your purchase as well. Many of those come free when you join as a member of one of the group webinars. So we empower you with the scripts that will help you know how to talk to the people, especially to build your team. If you don't know what to say to contractors, if you don't know how to interview for a good realtor, there are things that we have learned over the years that we are more than happy to share with you and bring you into our company to work with us. Some of these real estate investing topics that are available right now: wholesaling, rentals, buying, fixing, and flipping, seller financing, a whole series just on being creative with your financing, bank-owned and foreclosure properties, commercial, mobile home parks, and storage units. On the life coaching and personal development, whatever you are struggling with, I promise you that we have struggled with that as well and have been blessed to be able to learn things from other people, other companies, other gurus, some of the masters out there in the business that have taught us time management, money management and wealth building, divorce, grief and loss recovery, and addiction recovery. And many of these things we actually not only coach on, but because we've lived through it, we are able to do it in a way that gives you accountability to progress. We don't want you stuck in your yuck. Whatever you're stuck with, we are very happy to help you move forward from. And because Steve and I have accountability backgrounds as accountability coaches, we can guide you step by step through whatever you're dealing with now into the future that you want. So hopefully you have a dream of what you want your life to be. Hopefully you have a plan for that, even a written plan. If you don't, then let's get you one. Let's get you a plan for what are you doing here on this earth, what do you want to accomplish, and if any of these things, divorce, death, addiction, anything is holding you back from really living your dream, let us know. We are on that path with you, and step by step we'll get you to the life that you really, really want, not the one that you're necessarily in the middle of right now. But you do have to start somewhere, so we start with where you're at. So this little cartoon, I just had to point out, Steve always picks us fun little cartoons. You know, that's a pretty self-aware kid in the 4th grade. Do you honestly expect me to go through the 4th grade without a life coach? You know, your kids might actually need some life coaching too, but that kid, he was just adorable. I just had to point that out. Now on business development, we are entrepreneurs ourselves, plural. We have started businesses, we have grown businesses, we've sold businesses. There are skills that you're going to need to start a business, but a lot of them are developed as you go. There are some tools available to you. We share the ones that we have. We share our experience with you. We help you get your business started, and this could be an MLM, a networking, multi-level networking company. It can be a traditional brick and mortar company. It can be any kind that you like. The business basics are the same. But then we also steer you and help you, guide you through that process of building whatever type of business you have, because they all are grown a little bit differently. Although you'll notice down here the marketing and sales has to happen. Where and how you market might be a little bit different, but this is definitely a part of growing a business. And you should always be protected through entity and tax protection. So we cover that. Employee versus contractor. Should you hire employees? Do you want to deal with what comes with having employees, or would you prefer to just have independent contractors? We talk with you about that. We help you figure out what is best for your company and best for where you're at right now with your company. And then scaling and duplication. That's a pretty tricky process, but we can help you through that as well. If you already have a company, but you want to grow it and you want to duplicate any pieces or all of what you're doing in the company so that you can have more time freedom, more of whatever you're desiring for your lifestyle, then you're going to achieve that through scaling and duplicating in your company. And then leadership will support you in going through the process of finding the right people in the right places, because if you're going to be a grand leader, you need to have people in your company also that are good at what they do, and they need to be fitted according to their skills and their motivations and also their personality types. So we definitely help with some business development in all of those categories. And if you have anything else that you need help with, let us know and we can tailor make some of those sessions for you and your company. If you would like more information about any of these products or services, feel free to contact us. We put 4 different ways on this slide. So the first one is our Facebook page through Accelerated Real Estate Investing. Our website is at iliveaccelerated.com. You can call or text to 801-809-2764, and you are now able to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is getting more and more videos put on all the time. Some short ones if you just have a few minutes, and some long ones if you really want to get in there and study it out. So you can find our channel, I Live Accelerated, on YouTube, and watch whatever you like. If you have any questions on what you see, or if you would like the accountability and the support to achieve any of the things that you're seeing us do and you want to do, then definitely just get in touch with us. Let us know what your questions are. We can provide you with an initial free consultation to assess where you're at, what your needs are, and then help match some coaching to that, whether that be individual, group coaching, business coaching, life coaching, whatever it is you need. So hope that you learned something fun tonight. I am open for questions. And Steve, did you have anything that you wanted to say as we're getting into people's questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we're really invested in seeing you succeed in what you do. Your success is our success. That's the only way that we can be successful, is to help other people. And so we look forward to working with you in any way we can. And we're excited to be able to offer what we feel is a really great program. It would help you specifically in the real estate end of things, as well as some life issues if you wanted to work with us on that as well.
Absolutely. So I had a question on how do you determine what your return on investment is? Now, the definition of return on investment is that it's just the amount of money that an investment brings back to you on the amount of money that you have invested into it, generally expressed as a percentage. So a return on investment might be 10%, 20%, 30%, whatever it is. And it's over a period of time. And so generally, in the real estate investing world, that's going to be over a year. So just a year's time. So if your investment is for a rental property and it's year after year after year, it's pretty easy to figure out what that rate of return is, or your return on investment is for that year. If you have something like a fix and flip and it only runs 5 months, you can calculate what your return on investment is over that 5-month period of time. So there are different ways that investors figure out what their actual return on investment is, but that is the most common definition, and how to figure that out is something that we can cover in a one-on-one session. If you have any particular deals that you want to analyze, we can help you walk through that and figure out what your potential return on investment is on any kind of deal, whether that's a rental, a fix or flip, a wholesale deal, a commercial deal, anything at all. Steve, do you have any comments on that one?
No, you did well with that.
Okay. Any other questions that are out there? Go ahead and feel free to put them into your chat box or your questions box. Here's one that is a pretty common question, and it is about how do you figure out what a 70%, what is a 70% rule on a property? Now this ties in more with the buying, fixing, and flipping in general, because what we're talking about is buying something, fixing it up, and then reselling it to come up with that 70% rule. So when you're out there and you're at the real estate investing clubs and you're meeting other investors, when they're talking about an 80% rule or a 70% rule, that is a common terminology that you're going to hear at those kinds of places, and this is what it means. If you have a property that is going to resell, say, at $250,000, and you know that it's going to cost about $30,000 or so to fix it up, the best way to figure out what your potential profit is, so if you're looking for that 30% profit because you're using a 70% rule, you take the $250,000 and then you multiply it by 0.70. That gives you your 70%. And then most investors are going to subtract the cost of repairs off of that. So that's a $30,000 subtraction off of there, and then that gives you your estimated offer price. So that is the gist of how you figure out a 70% rule. Any other questions tonight? Anything on rentals specifically? Okay, just one more on rentals. Do I prefer to use a property management company? I'm getting a lot of feedback again. Can you mute yourself out for a sec? Thank you. All right, so on personal preference, and I'm going to ask you this too, Steve, in a minute. What is my personal preference on managing things if they're locally versus out of state? I'll tell you, I've done a lot of personal landlording, property management of my own properties, and it's not my favorite thing. I don't make a good return on investment. It's kind of been a nightmare at different times on different properties. So even if I am local to the properties, it's still not my preference. I really like to hire professional property managers, and absolutely out of state. That's not even a question. It is mandatory because I'm not there to keep an eye on the tenants, to drive by and see how the yard is. I will always have local property managers local to that property out of state that will keep an eye and screen the tenants and do all of the evictions and everything else that's necessary that comes along with owning rentals. Steve, how about you?
Well, this is actually the same question you have to weigh out in so many other areas of real estate investing. There's just a lot of things that you can do yourself or somebody else to do. What you have to recognize is that you either have to decide to be an investor or be a landlord or to be a fixer-upper guy. And the moment you pick up a paintbrush, for example, you're making the wages of a painter. But the moment you decide that you're going to manage your own property and maybe do the maintenance, now you're getting the wages of a maintenance guy. And if you don't have anything else to do, you don't have any money to pay for it, that's not a bad solution. However, once you become an investor making money on what it is that you're doing as an investor, you lose money every time you go do one of these other things that wouldn't pay as well as the return that you're getting on as an investor. So my recommendation is to outsource any opportunity you can in any area that has to do with things that anyone else can do. If things that only you can do, go ahead and do those. But anything that you can outsource, my recommendation is outsource it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you for that. I would 100% agree with you on all of that. So it looks like that's the end of the questions for the night. Hopefully you guys have had a wonderful time. Thank you for coming. We are always here to help, so let us know how we can help you achieve your goals and your dreams. And we'll be back next Monday night for a fun topic of buying, fixing, and flipping. How do you make those chunks of cash early on to put into your bank account so you've got some down payment money to get into your rentals, or some option money if you want to do some seller financing. So there's a lot of fun stuff to come next week. We will look forward to seeing you then. Thanks, everybody.